Coping with COVID is brought to you by the South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control. Visit scdhec.gov for an updated list of testing sites and important information on how to protect yourself, your family, and friends from the coronavirus. SCDHEC, healthy people, healthy communities. Also, the City of Columbia Office of Business Opportunities, helping to meet the needs of small, minority, and women-owned businesses in the City of Columbia. Log on to columbiasc.net/OBO. Agape Counseling and Training Center. Call 803-779-2777 for licensed professionals of counselors and social workers helping families, engaged and married couples, and individuals of all ages gain an understanding of all aspects of their life. If you're having a challenge coping with COVID, contact Agape Counseling and Training Center at agapects.com. And Columbia Housing Authority. The agency is looking for stories from former residents of Allen Benedict Court to retain some of the property's rich history. In its 80-year life, Allen Benedict Court has been home to some of the country's elite, including a Grammy Award-winning performer, corporate executives, national television celebrities, a host of doctors, lawyers, and NBA greats. So share your pictures, mementos, and memories at chcares@chasc.org. Coping with COVID, brought to you by the South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control, the City of Columbia Office of Business Opportunities, Columbia Housing Authority, Agape Counseling and Training Center, and Palmetto Media Connection.
Coping with COVID with Tre Tailor.
Fight the spread and take a stand against coronavirus. Wear a mask in public. Stay at least 6 feet apart from others. And get tested. Join us and fight the spread. Visit scdhec.gov/COVID-19.
Good afternoon. I'm Tre Tailor, and you are watching Coping with COVID, updates on the pandemic and information to help you thrive and survive COVID-19. It's brought to you in part by SCDHEC, In It Together, the City of Columbia Office of Business Opportunities, Palmetto Media Connections, and Agape Counseling and Training Center. Listen, if you're having some challenges coping with COVID, please contact the folks at Agape Counseling and Training Center. Well, we're 2 weeks away from a big election, and not only nationally, but regionally and locally, it's a pretty big election. And next couple of weeks, we're going to be focusing on election 2020 in Richland County and nationally. And today, we're talking with one of the candidates for the Richland School Board 2. Dr. Dee Bell Williams joins us today on Coping with COVID. Hey there, beautiful. How are you?
How are you, Tre?
Doing great. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to come right back with Dr. Dee Bell Williams next on Coping with COVID. I'm Tre Tailor. Today, applications are being accepted to apply for additional funds for small and minority businesses. Now, the CARES Act is releasing $65 million extra dollars for nonprofits and small and minority-owned businesses in South Carolina. The deadline is November 1st, and please look at the screen for more information for nonprofits and also small businesses. Now, I did understand that this morning the website was running a little bit slow, a little technical difficulties. I'm sure the amount of applications. But the CARES Act folks say, hang in there, they're going to get to you. Kamala Harris heads to North Carolina today. The rescheduled trip was canceled last week due to reports that members of her staff tested positive for COVID. Now she'll travel to Charlotte and Asheville to encourage North Carolinians to vote early. Early voting began in North Carolina October 15th. And the Sumter High School JV football team has been placed under quarantine after possibly being exposed to COVID. Parents were notified in a letter dated yesterday that someone who may have been contagious attended last Thursday's game. Now, the students affected were asked to refrain from any school or school-related activities until October 30th. SCDHEC has your most up-to-date listings on times, dates, and locations of COVID tests in and around South Carolina. Check the bottom of the screen for more information that will be scrolling throughout the show. Also, the DHEC Care Line. That number is available if you need more information about COVID tests and about transportation. Now, speaking of transportation, if you are unable to get to a COVID test and need it, and you live in Richland or Clarendon counties, well, paramedics there are actually doing in-home testings. Look at the information on the screen right there for more information. Now, also flu shots. You need to get your flu shot, and SCDHEC is helping you. Also, Prisma Health has several locations, again, in and around South Carolina that are administering free flu shots. Please check the screen for more information, and that information will also be scrolling at the bottom of the screen throughout the show. Mask Up Columbia SC is still going on. Visit Mask Up Columbia SC for you to Post a picture of yourself in your favorite mask. Get your family and friends to like and share it, and you could be a winner of some great prizes from the City of Columbia. Now, if you're having some challenges paying your rent or mortgage, SC Legal Association and the South Carolina Bar Association are offering a free toll-free number and website if you need rental or mortgage help. And the City of Columbia is offering a 6-month payment plan for anyone who is behind on their water bill. They also offer up to 75% payment assistance. Now, SCDO, the South Carolina Department of Education and Workforce, is still offering free classes and certifications for anyone that's on unemployment that needs it. Now, you can choose from classes in business, technology, data science, arts, and humanities. Courses are offered in both English and Spanish, and you've got till the end of the month, October 31st, to register. The Richland County Democratic Party is still looking for canvassers to leave information at voters' doors. Now, the pay is $15 per hour, and it includes training. You must be at least 18 years old, computer literate, and own a smartphone. Go to Executive Director at richlandscdems.com. Absentee voting, of course, is still going on here in South Carolina, and you can absentee vote at any of the satellite areas. Now, even if you don't typically vote in that satellite area, if you're early voting, you can go to any of the satellite locations in South Carolina. So again, we've got the information on the screen for more information. I do have an update too about mail-in ballots. If you are mailing in your ballot, here's the other thing. You don't have to wait in the line. You can mail it, of course, but if you want to take it to the voter registration office or one of the satellite locations, you can do that. You shouldn't have to wait in line. Several of the districts say they have either a drop box, or in Sumter, you can actually go to the head of the line and give it to someone. Now, Rashonda Pratt was giving us some great information a couple of weeks ago. She has a YouTube channel dedicated specifically if you need some help with virtual learning or virtual work. Go to Rashonda's YouTube channel and get information. Now, it is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and we've been focusing on that all month. Please look at the information on the screen. And if you need some information, if you need help, please contact the folks at the South Carolina Domestic Violence Foundation so that you can get the help that you need. Coping with COVID is streaming live on my YouTube page. Please visit YouTube. I want to say hi to all of the YouTubers. Thank you so much. Please hit the subscribe button, and we would love to see you. Also, Coping with COVID is also streaming on the TaylorMade Productions page. Please go over there and like and follow so that you can not only watch Coping with COVID Monday through Friday, it's just Monday through Saturday at 2 p.m., but you can also get all of your COVID related updates. I'm Tre Tailor, and you are watching Coping with COVID, updates on the pandemic and information to help you thrive and survive COVID-19. And we're focusing on the 2020 election season. We're giving you content about voting, the various local, state, and national races, and more to keep you updated and informed. Today, we're focusing on the Richland School District 2 race, and Dr. Dee Bell Williams joins us today. Hello, Dr. Dee Bell Williams. How are you?
I'm doing good, Tre. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for joining us. She's a best-selling author of Cultural Focused Learning, and that's her book right there, The Simple System to Escape Classroom Management Disaster. She's a member of the Talented 10th and was recently named Top 20 Under 40 by the South Carolina Black Pages. She's a recent graduate of South Carolina Emerge and has been an educator in the school system for some 20 years. There's so much more on her bio, but I'm going to let her tell you more about that. Dr. Dee Bell Williams joins us on Coping with COVID. So listen, you grew up in rural South Carolina, raised by your grandparents, where you say they gave you the motivation to be an educator. Tell us about that.
Well, my grandmother was an educator, and many of the teachers that I had when I was in high school, she taught them.
Oh, wow.
So it's, being from a small rural town, typically everybody's related or have
Or
had
knows everybody. Yeah.
knows everybody or have had some type of dealing or interaction, with the different families. And being raised around an educator, I actually did not intend to go in education when I
Really?
went to college. Absolutely. I actually wanted to be in media. That was actually my first love. And it's wonderful how things just come full circle, because even though I'm in education, with the modalities of YouTube and Facebook Live
That's
and IG
right.
Live, it still gives me an opportunity to use my platform to actually share the information about my career and the work that I do. So I still get the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
To do, my first passion, which is media, but also the passion that has developed over the almost 2 decades, which is education. I'm still able to share that. So in essence, not only was my grandmother an educator, but many of my father's first cousins, which of course are my cousins as well that I grew up around, many of them are educators. And so I was enamored with the educational field. And because our community was so small, and because we dealt a lot with other families within the community, I saw the importance of community work early on. So when I really began to get the hang of how important it is for our communities to have leaders who have buy-in to them, their families, and the things that they need in order to be successful in the community, that really became a strong passion of mine.
Yeah, yeah. We're talking to Dr. Dee Bell Williams. She is a candidate for Richland District 2 School Board. Now, you founded Dr. D Unlimited, an education consultant firm. Now, what's the goal of that, Dr. D?
So the goal of Dr. D Unlimited Education Consulting and Company is to actually target educators, teachers, principals, superintendents. It's a framework that's built out of research that I've done based on the impact of how important culture is within the classroom. As you may already notice, that things are shifting quickly in education.
Yeah.
And so we have to begin now looking at research that is a little bit ahead and more progressive, in order that we're prepared to ensure that our teachers are adequately and effective in the classroom, adequately prepared and effective in the classroom, and that our school leadership understands the body of research so that they can provide the correct professional development to ensure that they're mobilizing their schools and their school districts forward. Because at the end of the day, we want to ensure that the children, specifically here in Richland School District 2, and of course in the state of South Carolina, are set up to compete globally, no matter what they choose to do after high school. And so that's the essence of my business. I work specifically with educators. However, during COVID-19, during the pandemic, I have actually expanded to not only working with educators, but also those who have local businesses, pastors, and people who work in different fields, because they now understand the value of building culture, with whether it's in their business, whether it's in their church, whatever it is that they lead. They know now that we're moving into culture, and it's no longer about managing things, it's about leading and building people.
Yeah, yeah. Now, you've worked with youth in schools K through 12, and of course in college, as you're at Benedict College now. And you've also worked as a mentor. What are you hearing from young people, Dr. D, that you think will help you during this race? And if you actually win in a couple of weeks?
Absolutely. What I'm hearing from many young people is that they are very concerned with the changes and the challenges that they're being faced with. Of course, we know that there are internet disparities, there are broadband gaps within our community. So, of course, as a board candidate, I am looking into the experiences that I have, not only locally with businesses here in Columbia, but also the relationships that I have in government, because that's really where we begin to solve our problems in education, is working in tandem with our local government, whether that's town or city council, our state house representatives, our senators. That's how we actually get things done in education, because they actually control the budgeting for the school board. They control, what we're able to do and what we're able to get. So it's important to build those relationships, because when you have that, you're able to then make the necessary changes that are going to be impactful for the students. The other thing that they are concerned about, of course, is COVID and actually being in school and going back to school, and their safety, the safety of their family members. Some of our children actually live with grandparents, or they live with individuals who have pre-existing conditions. So their concern is, if I go back into the building and I put myself at risk, I may bring something home to my grandparent or my elder or someone in my home that's already suffering from an illness. So they do have a concern about their safety regarding COVID. However, what I'm hearing most is that they are ready, for the most part, to get back into the building. They're ready for the socialization, and they're ready to really be face-to-face with their teachers.
Yeah, wow. Well, I want to talk to you more about that later, because I do want to know what your thoughts are about kids going back to school. But we'll talk about that in the second break, because I want to talk a little bit more about your experience with Emerge. I know that it's an organization that prepares females to run for office. What was most beneficial for you during this class?
Actually, Trey, there was a lot that was really beneficial, because this organization literally teaches us how to run a campaign, how to run for office. So many of us who have either already, previously graduated from Emerge, and those that will be coming into the class of 2021, what they will experience, you literally get to look at every area that is needed to mobilize a campaign. That's campaign management, budgeting, raising money, understanding the importance of utilizing software to help you reach voters, which is the most important part of any campaign. And so we spend a lot of time learning how to reach voters. And that's actually one of the greatest takeaways that I had coming out of SC Emerge, because naturally I'm an extrovert, so I love talking to people anyway. But the strategy that I learned, and the different software and the modalities that we have access to, and the knowledge of how to actually access voters, was actually one of the greatest commodities that I was able to pull from that experience. So reaching out and teaching me how to strategically reach out to voters was my biggest lesson and my biggest takeaway.
Really? How has that, can you just tell us a little bit more about that? How have you used strategy what strategy points has it been for you to reach out? Because as you say, you're an extrovert, so you're out there in the community. And here's the other thing, which I don't know, when did you graduate? When was the cohort over?
It was over in June 2020, June.
Oh, so it could have covered very much, covered COVID, because I was going to say that adds an additional monkey wrench into into the equation.
It absolutely does, Trey. And to be very honest with you, I just shared with someone this morning, we're working on some planning. And I said, literally, especially with in-person absentee voting already kicking off October 5th here in South Carolina, we actually, to me, November 3rd is every day until November 3rd.
It is. It is.
People are at the polls actively voting right now.
Yeah.
Of course, as a candidate, I am doing my due diligence to keep a pulse on what's happening at the polls. And we are seeing that there is a record turnout.
Yes.
Voting. And so we had to pivot and shift our campaign in the last 2 weeks, because what we would have ordinarily done, typically if this was a traditional time, without COVID being involved, we would still all be prepping, maybe sending out mailers to reach voters who were undecided, calling undecided voters, maybe having, more events to continue to drum the name out and everything of that nature. But we can't do any of that because people started voting October 5th. So you literally have to be connecting with the people at the polls. Yeah. And because school board is the last item on the ballot, and many times in a presidential election, people are not as privy to who school board members actually are, because it's so focused on the national aspect of the election. Not only am I making myself known at the polls by sharing with voters who I am, but I'm also finding myself giving voter education, helping them
Yes.
understand that that bottom of the ballot is actually the most important part of that ballot, because school board members are directly responsible for how we look at budgeting as it relates to raising taxes in the community and how that affects taxes on your home, fixing, working with town council to ensure that our buses are riding on roads that are not bumpy or broken or potholes. So we work with a lot of local necessary officials that actually interact with your day-to-day life. So though this is an amazing and very important presidential election, everything up and down that ballot, but especially down at the bottom, is very, very important because it affects you every day.
Yeah, and that's what, I have been, and a lot of people who are, dealing with voter education right now are really focusing on letting people know, yes, it is a very important presidential race, but what really will impact us more than anything are these local races. So, it's interesting that you should say that you're not only running your campaign, you're running everybody's campaign, and every candidate is, because it's so much about voter education. Yeah. We're talking to Dr. Dee Bell Williams. She is candidate for Richland School District 2. You're watching Coping with COVID. I'm Tre Tailor. Thank you, everyone, so much for watching. I want to remind you to please post and share so we can get this message to the masses, so you can know who your candidates are for all of these local races. We talked a little bit about your book during the intro. Tell me about the book, Dee.
Well, this book was inspired by work that I was already doing and the work that I've done for almost 2 decades in education. And it's called culture-focused teaching. And the reason why it's called culture-focused teaching is because it is specific to ensuring that our educators are not only in the classroom, but that they are prepared to really build students in the classroom. We are suffering what I call in the book an educational fugitive crisis, where teachers are leaving the field left and right. And what I found out by doing the research and writing this book, that it's not just, of course, a South Carolina issue. It's not a national issue. This is a global issue. This is an issue that I am seeing happening, and have sat in rooms in other countries with other professors and other teachers, where we're seeing that there is teacher retention concerns all over the globe. Wow. And it is because so many things are changing, and because not many people, because you got to look at the triple effect. So if not many people are going into education, therefore, we're losing those people who are working from the scholarly level, because as those who were before us are aging out into retirement, if we don't have scholars to come in behind them, then we're losing that push and that momentum. Well, I decided that not only was I an educator, but I'm an educational scholar as well, because of my experience, background, and the exposure that I've had. And so I put it all in this book to help teachers understand that they are valuable. They are needed. They just need the tools in order to be successful. I do specifically talk about the educator equity in my workforce. And I talk about that specifically because it is an issue and it is a concern. What that means is we have to look at the demographics of our educators as well as the demographics of the school which they teach. Because if we don't begin to understand our culture, and we don't begin to understand, the differences that we bring to the classroom and how it's all valued, then what we're doing is just really showing up every day, spinning the wheel, and we're making these gaps that we talk about, we're just widening them. We're not bringing them together. And so what this book does is help educators bring that achievement gap closer in. It brings the educator equity gap closer in, because we got to talk about, our children from Black and Brown communities and the way that they're performing. And we also have to look at the type of educators that we are hiring in their formative years, which we talk about in K through 8th, which are the formative years of a child's life. In U.S. Department of Education statistics, and I talk about it in the book as well, majority of teachers who teach kindergarten through 8th grade in public schools, where the majority of the student population are Black and Brown, actually are not Black and Brown educators.
Right.
So I tell people often, and I kind of get a look when I share this with them, but I honestly think that it's less about an achievement gap, it's an educator equity gap. If we don't have educators that reflect the body of students, or if we don't have that pool of people who do reflect that body of students, but those who are willing to educate themselves on the body of students that they serve, then we're going to continue, again, like I said, to see the gap widen. And so what this research does is help educators understand that they're valued, but they just need tools to understand how to actually mobilize and work in the communities that they're serving in. I talk about, of course, researching the demographics of the schools that you work, so you understand the families. It's not just about the child, but it's about their family and the culture that they come from.
Right.
Of course, you know this, Tre, but you can be of the same race and there's still subcultures within.
That's right. That's right.
And again, these are things that educators now have to study in order to be effective in the classroom. And that's what this research does. That's what this book does. It actually connects to my e-course. I actually have an e-course on the culturefocusedteaching.com website that goes along with the book, because the book technically just kind of walks you through it, gives you the tips, shares the information, but then the course actually takes you through the practice of it, so you actually know how to implement it in your classroom.
Yeah, well, I definitely want to come back to that too, because that was going to be my next question about, the fact that you say 82% of educators who teach Black and Brown students are not Black or Brown. So let's talk about, how does that impact your schools? How does that impact students? And you touched on this a little bit. So does that mean that there needs to be more Black and Brown teachers? Or does that mean the non-Black and Brown teachers should have some type of cultural training? And as you said, that's so much to train a person because there's a culture, then there's a subculture, then there's a subculture,
Absolutely. I think it's both and. It's for me, when I look at this situation, it's both and. We need more teachers of color.
Yeah.
And we also need to ensure that the professional development that we provide regarding culture is applicable.
Right.
A lot of times, and because I train in seminars, I go to conferences quite often where I am one of the breakout sessions or the keynote speaker talking about culture. And oftentimes it's a checkoff list. Oh, well, I attended that, to get my professional development, but there's not the intent to actually use what you actually receive. So what I am sharing, even during my campaign, is that we have to ensure that we evaluate the effectiveness of the professional development regarding cultural competency. Absolutely. That we're giving our educators, because, you can give someone something, but is it working? So we have to make sure that we properly evaluate it. What I love about Richland School District 2, Dr. Baron Davis has an amazing initiative that he has called the Premier 100.
I was going to ask about that too, girl.
Absolutely. And I absolutely love it. And I indeed support it. And that initiative, for those that are watching, is about in the next 4 years, between now and 2024, he is proposing to have and hire 100 minority male educators in Richland School District 2. And so, of course, the conversations will begin with our upcoming students who are in high school, who are now matriculating through junior, senior year, as we're preparing them to go to college to consider the field of education. And so, of course, as an HBCU graduate and HBCU professor, that, of course, I'm going to work, to link, that body of knowledge up, because when you talk about using minority or actually targeting minority educators or potential educators, you want to look at minority institutions, your HBCU and your MSIs, which are your minority serving institutions.
Yeah.
Majority of, the students there are Black around, or they come from that population. So I think that, again, like I said, it's both, and we definitely need to target and hire more African-American educators. However, we also need to ensure that the cultural competency professional development that we are, in fact, giving our teachers who are not Black and Brown is effective, and that they understand the impact that it does have within the classroom, because it's significant, especially now, Tre. I mean, I can't think of a more, I would say, prime time to talk about the importance of culture, especially if you're not Black and you teach
Right.
Black brown students in light of what we've experienced in this nation. We're still at a place of civil unrest. You've seen what we experienced all summer long during the pandemic with police brutality, with the heightened of Black Lives Matter and all the different things that have happened. We cannot afford not to deal with this now.
Well, we're going to talk about that coming up next. How you plan to, or how you propose, how you think we should deal with that topic in our schools. We're also going to talk about your work globally, and if you have noticed anything along your travels that could be implemented in Richland 1. We're going to talk about that and more coming up next with Dr. Dee Bell Williams. She is a candidate for Richland School District 2, and she joins us here on Coping with COVID, and we're going to come back with her more next. I'm Tre Tailor.
Coping with COVID is brought to you by the South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control. Visit scdheck.gov for an updated list of testing sites and important information on how to protect yourself, your family, and friends from the coronavirus. SCDHEC, healthy people, healthy communities. Also, the City of Columbia Office of Business Opportunities, helping to meet the needs of small, minority, and women-owned businesses in the City of Columbia. Log on to columbiasc.net/OBO. Agape Counseling and Training Center. Call 803-779-2777 for licensed professionals of counselors and social workers helping families, engaged and married couples, and individuals of all ages gain an understanding of all aspects of their life. If you're having a challenge coping with COVID, contact Agape Counseling and Training Center at agapects.com. And Columbia Housing Authority. The agency is looking for stories from former residents of Allen Benedict Court to retain some of the property's rich history. In its 80-year life, Allen Benedict Court has been home to some of the country's elite, including a Grammy Award-winning performer, corporate executives, national television celebrities, a host of doctors, lawyers, and NBA greats. So share your pictures, mementos, and memories at chcares@chasc.org. Coping with COVID, brought to you by the South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control, the City of Columbia Office of Business Opportunities, Columbia Housing Authority, Agape Counseling and Training Center, and Palmetto Media Connection.
Coping with COVID with Tre Tailor.
I know what most people think. If he broke my jaw, I would just leave. But it's more complicated than that. There are days when you tell yourself to go. Go, 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 just go. But when you get in that car, you freeze. You think, oh my God, I can't access the bank account. Oh my God, I literally have nothing with my name on it, not even the credit card in my wallet. Oh my God, I'd have to quit because he knows where I work. See? Not that easy to leave, is it?
It's Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and we've been doing shows and giving you information. We want you to utilize it if you need it. Please call someone, reach out if you or someone you know needs some help with domestic violence. I'm Tre Tailor, and you're watching Coping with COVID, updates on the pandemic and information to help you thrive and survive COVID-19. And we are focusing on the 2020 election season with content about voting, various local, state, and national races, and more to keep you updated and informed. Today, we're talking to Dr. Dee Bell Williams. She is a candidate for Richland School District 2. And thank you, Dr. Bell, Dr. D, for joining us today. We've been having a great conversation. You've traveled globally, and I really want to ask you, if and what have you learned on your travels internationally that you could, bring back to Richland School District 2?
Absolutely. So I've actually been traveling probably in my field in education, probably for the last 12 of the 18 years that I've been in education. And I absolutely love the experiences because you find out that you are more alike than different, regardless of where you are, where you live, what part of the world you live in. And with education, we often are experiencing similar problems and often similar highlights. Some of the things that I can bring to the Richland School District 2 school board is the foresight that many other countries are already moving and mobilizing in when it relates to the trajectory of where education is going. Recently, the most recent travel, which was in February, right before the global shutdown during, this pandemic, I was in London, and I was there presenting culture-focused teaching, and I was with many other educators, people from Japan, Poland, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, just various aspects of the world. And again, like I said, many of them have already they were doing virtual learning when I was there with them as options for many of their children and their families because of the different cultural dynamics that they experience in those respective countries. So they already were mobilizing into making virtual learning pretty much normal. And so we're now kind of shifting and shaking to try to figure out where do we fit in this scale of virtual or remote learning. The good thing about Richland School District 2 is that they had a virtual learning school there before the pandemic. So they had that in place. Now we got to look at infrastructure sustainability. So how are these other countries partnering with businesses to ensure that they're getting the technological advances that they need in order to continue to be sustainable during these changing times? So what I can do is leverage those relationships that I've made over the years and also continue to stay in contact about what they're doing to mobilize their state or their countries forward. Recently here, I've been in hard conversation with some of my, I would say, co-workers across the nation, business partners and co-workers across the nation, where we're talking heavily about mandating financial behavior and financial literacy as a course in high school. And what I mean by mandate is that, yes, it possibly is an elective in much of our curriculum, but it's not a mandatory course, which is very important in the times that we're moving in. Yes, our algebra and yes, our geometry is still very important, but we are finding that as we look at and we begin to look at the demographics of the children that we are serving, what is going to be prime for them to understand and to be able to compete in this globally functioning society. And our children, specifically children from Black and Brown families, need strong structure and education regarding financial behaviors and financial literacy. And so that's one of the initiatives that I really, really want to work with the board and take into our legislative officials to ensure that we're able to lock in a permanent course for all of our students that they are mandated to take before graduating high school.
Yeah. Well, I know that you mentioned earlier that you've talked to a lot of our young people and they are anxious to get back in the classroom. And if you win in a couple of weeks, you will likely be making some decisions about COVID and the kids going back to school. So what do you think? What is your opinion?
Well, I will say this. One thing that I love about being on board or being on any board or organization is that though I will share my opinion, it's about the cooperation. It's about being able to cooperatively come up with the best decision. I believe that it's okay that we begin to look into phase 2. We are moving on November 4th to phase 2, which is a hybrid model. What I like about the option is it still gives parents a choice as to whether to send their children into the building or keep them in a virtual learning environment. And there are parents who will keep their children in a virtual learning environment. And there are those who will send their children back into the brick and mortar. So it's, again, I love the fact that it has options. There are options there for our parents and for our educators. Many of our educators are still concerned about having the number of children coming back into the classroom. And of course, we have to consider their health and safety. Of course, everyone knows that at the beginning of our school year, we did lose 2 teachers, and one teacher, her mother,
passed away after that, right?
Passed away after that. And so we do have to ensure that we protect not only the physical health of our educators, but the mental health of our educators, because that has to be a question that's swirling in the mind of our educators. If the children come back into the classroom, does that increase my chances? So, there are a lot of things that our educators have to consider. And honestly, and I have to speak candidly about this, many of them may be trying to decide whether the field is still a good fit for them,
right,
because of the situation. Again, it adds to that pool of educators who are fleeing the field. And so we have to think strategically, and that's what I plan to do as a board member, because I've been in the classroom and I understand what educators go through. I have the voice of an educator, which we need on our school board to be able to speak directly to the concerns of the educators, so that they understand that these decisions are not just being made, but they are being made with having them being in consideration. And I have to help the board to also understand, coming from that background and having that foresight, is that we do have to ensure that we think intently and strategically about our educators, because we don't want to lose educators.
Yeah. Well, let's talk, since we're on educators, a little bit about teacher retention, because I know, as you said, you are an educator, and there is a problem. And you also talked about, making sure that there are enough educators and the diversity of educators. But we know that, as admirable a profession that it is, particularly now, teachers are reconsidering their options. So what could you do as a member of the school board to help?
I actually believe that all of the skills that I already offer to my clients all over the world as an educational consultant, again, I've been in the classroom and I know what teachers are experiencing. And now I have the experience as a consultant, where I'm bringing research to help educators understand their value and why they're needed. And a part of understanding your value is understanding the need for growth. And anytime our nation, our world, or even if it's locally, anytime we go through a change or a transition, you have to take a step back and then go back to the question of why. Mm-hmm. Why did I come into this field? What do I aim to accomplish? Because, of course, no one comes into teaching expecting to be a billionaire. No one comes into teaching expecting to be like super wealthy at this point, because we know that the field doesn't offer that type of lifestyle. So you have to go back to that reason of, let's evaluate why you're in the field. And now, after we get the answers of why you're in the field, let's look at the resources that the district has available to assist you in accomplishing that why. And this is the language that I would like to bring, and I desire and will bring to the school board, is let's look at the why, and then we'll take the why and let's build the how. This is how the district is able to assist you and support you as an educator. And if the district doesn't have the resources, because teachers are super innovative, and so they may have ideas that the district doesn't have the resource or the fiscal support for. And because I teach my educators, I teach my clients, you always want to be solution oriented. If the district does not have what you need to mobilize, then how can we get it? How can we put our heads together? Who do you know? What resources do you have? What human capital do you have that we can utilize as a district to make this not only applicable to what you need, but also to help another educator? So bringing in, again, that culture of team building, that culture of appreciation and value to our educators, and giving them a voice on the board so that they know they are fully supported.
We're talking to Dr. Dee Bell Williams. She is a candidate for Richland School Board District 2. I'm Tre Tailor. You're watching Coping with COVID. Please continue to post and share out this information so we can get this message to the masses. And if you have a question, please post it in the chat. So I often say, Dee, that we are living in a pandemic within a pandemic, COVID and racism, and our children are dealing and living with it also. They're right smack dab in the middle of it, as a matter of fact. Where do you think racism and police brutality fit in the discussion with our students in school?
I absolutely think that we cannot avoid it. We can no longer take the escapism mentality. We can no longer shut our eyes to it and turn a blind eye to it. And we can no longer put value on a person's feelings about it. We can no longer say that racism doesn't exist. We can no longer say, well, I'm not racist because I have Black friends. We can no longer use these microaggressive and implicit as well as explicit bias behaviors in order to just pass through. We have to talk about it. And I am from the country. And there's a saying that we say in the country, and I trip my clients out, and when I train, I give them this, and they're like, but they get it. And that saying is, plain talk gives good understanding. Mm-hmm. And what that basically means is that we'll never get to a resolution if we don't talk about it.
Yeah.
If we don't talk about how it affects me, as well as how it affects you. Because guess what? Racism is not one-sided. Racism is not all about just how African Americans feel. It's sometimes also about how those who have come from the demographic of those who typically are pointed towards as racist, if you're non-Black or brown. However, sometimes people grow up in environments that they did not choose. They grow up in environments that, they were just subject to that culture and that behavior. And until things are brought to their awareness and they see a different option, they may not know. So we have to look at all sides of it, because that's what culture does. It looks at, how did this start? Where does this reside? Is this a part of who you are, or was it a part of the environment that you were brought up in? So we have to have the discussion. And in our classrooms, we have to talk about it, because our children have been enamored in the last almost 5 to 6 months with seeing police brutality against their own race. So when our children go back into the classroom, and again, we're starting November 4th with a hybrid model, and we'll be moving, looking at the numbers to move into a traditional model whenever, that's safe and appropriate. But we have to think about the mindset that our children are coming back into the classroom after being enamored with news stories, Facebook posts, Instagram posts, Twitter posts of not only police brutality, but also seeing responses of racism from people that live right around them, from neighbors, from friends, from teachers, from coworkers. So it's like they're being enamored with it. So now we have to talk about it. And again, it needs to be discussed. I heard someone say, oh, it's a good place to talk about it in civics or government or history. Absolutely not. It's a place to talk about it in every subject. I don't care if you teach math, science, English. There is always a space to interject current events, and you can utilize your subject to then help the students synthesize their emotions and their feelings about the discussion. You can talk about it in English and then have them journal or write a story about it. Yeah. You can talk about it in mathematics and give them a project about doing statistical data on police brutality within their own city or state. So you can use the information to still get your lessons and your objectives on your, the things that you have to do for standards. You can still use it, but it has to be talked about because it is a reflection of their everyday life. And again, this is what I do when I train educators. You have to understand the culture of the children that you are dealing with, and you have to be able to then look at your own biases and then deal with those biases so that you allow your children to have a voice within the classroom so that you can build, then you will truly be able to educate them.
So Dee, how early do you think that should be, that students should be talking about this kind of thing in school?
Well, as a researcher, I do lots of research, and I research a lot of stuff regarding education. And one of the things that a lot of people don't know, some want to tend to shy away from it if it's kindergarten or if it's 3 or 4 years old. But as psychologists have proven that as early as 6 months of age,
wow,
children are able to identify and differentiate between hues of color. So early on, they're able to identify the differences between white or lighter skin, or black or darker skin. They're able to differentiate that. And so as they're growing and developing in their own homes, then they're starting to see behaviors and responses in behavior as it relates to how the people who's raising them are responding to different types of people. So they begin to calculate this, and this is the behavior that they're raised around. So I think as early as children are able to interact with each other is when parents should be having the conversation when they're talking. If children are getting ready to go in social environments like schools or even daycares, because some children are a little bit more advanced than others. They may speak earlier. They may interact a little bit more than some students. So as soon as they're able to socialize, I think that parents, and they notice differences. I don't think it's something that you should readily just make them aware, oh, that child is different, oh, that child is different. But when you see circumstances where the child is beginning to notice differences and they come home and they say, Mommy, why is Jackie darker than I am? Or why is Bobby lighter than I am? Why does he look like that? Then you're now starting to realize, okay, they're starting to notice color, hue, differentiations between race. And it's now start to have that conversation about the value of everyone.
Yeah, just as a side note, I have a 2 and a 4-year-old that live with me. And the 4-year-old, he didn't recognize it, but I knew somebody in his class must have said something, and they're biracial. So, he started, earlier in the year before school shut down, asking me, so-and-so is, I'm brown, but so-and-so is darker brown, or so-and-so is a lighter brown, so I know, you make a great point, because the conversation can begin earlier, and he continues since someone piqued his interest about it. Now he's more conscientious about it. My sister is a little browner. Who's the brownest? Are you browner too? So you're right. Even as early as 4. Dee, we've got about 10 minutes, about 5 minutes left with you, and I had a couple of more questions, but I want to give you an opportunity to talk about some things that specifically you want to cover if we have not covered that yet.
Absolutely. So those of you who are watching, again, I am running for school board for Richland School District 2. And my motto is, I have the educational experience that you can count on. And as you can see, we are living in different days and times, and we want educators on our board who are progressive. First of all, I'm going to back up. We want educators on our board.
Right.
We want educators on our board. I think that for too long we have, and we appreciate the value that everyone from every field brings to the board, but it is more important now than ever to have the voice of educators on our board, on our school board, because things are moving and things are changing. And I am a researcher. I'm a global educational consultant. I understand the trajectory of where education is going. And you want to have board members who can work cooperatively with other board members in order to mobilize our school district forward. So Richland School District 2 is known as a premier school district. And when I hear the word premier, of course, we think outstanding. We think above and beyond excellence. Well, in order to sustain our premier reputation, we're going to need leaders on our board to ensure that we not only continue to hire quality educators, but also to continue to train those educators that are on staff, and also our other staff members, not just our educators, but all of our staff members within the school district. Also those that understand the value of using funds in a manner that is responsible fiscally as it relates to what we need in our classroom. I propose to work with the school board to ensure that we hire more mental health specialists within our school. During this time, currently, not all schools in Richland School District 2 have school nurses. And I can't think of a greater time where we need school nurses in all of our schools, but we need the funding. So we have to have individuals on the board who will speak to the necessity of what we need within our schools. I know that the district did a large PR bond to get more SROs into the school. And though I value the work of SROs, I am not a big proponent of strong visibility of SROs within our schools in this particular climate. I think we need to reevaluate and rethink their roles within the schools. And so that's one of the things that I do want to talk about. I think they're valuable within the school, but to overpopulate our schools with SROs, that funding could be a greater use to where we use preventive measures than those reactionary measures. And so that's, those are things that I definitely want to work with. We do serve a predominantly Black and brown population in Richland School District 2. So it is important as a board member to talk about issues and concerns that come up regarding racial issues or racism within the classroom, or concerns of talking about race within the classroom. It's very important that we talk about that. And I am a school board member that will talk about it. As a culture and diversity consultant, I will bring the attitude and the behavior of cooperation, as well as building a school board culture. Currently, when I'm looking at the school board, I don't see a culture, a consistent culture of representation of the community. And I would like to bring a consistent culture and build that culture of what a school board of a premier school district should look like. So again, I know many of you have already voted. You have family members that are preparing to vote. Please go all the way down the ballot to school board. I am Dee Bell Williams. I am the second name on the school board ballot. So once you get down there, you don't have to look far. And so please pass the word. You want an educator on your school board, but you want someone who has what I call class act leadership. And that ACT is an acronym. And it stands for accountable, cooperative, and transformative. You want school board leadership who's able to cooperate with other board members, ones that are accountable to the community, and ones that are transformative, who is able to continue to mobilize and sustain our school district as we look into a future. So again, please go out and vote. You can find out more information about me on social media. My website, it should be popped up on the screen there. And also you can go to Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. And the handle is at Dr. D, the number 4, Rich, the number 2. You can find me on all of those platforms, and I would love to hear from each and every one of you. And thank you also again for having me.
Thank you so much, Dee. Before you go, Ronnie Taylor has a question. He says, you want the teachers to do all of this, but don't want to pay them what they're worth. You want to chime in on that? Thank you, Ronnie, for your question.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ronnie, so much for that question. And I totally agree with you that there is a challenge, that we want the teachers to do so much, but the pay is not there. And one thing I do want to share is to understand what the school board does. The school board can advocate for higher teacher pay, but we don't make the decision for the pay. So as an educator who has been in the classroom and who felt the pain of low pay, I will be an advocate with those that, again, sit in the state house, our state house representatives, our senators. I will be the advocate to go and be the voice for our teachers to continue that conversation about increasing teacher pay. So thank you again so much. But keep in mind, our board is an advocate, but we don't make the decision for teacher pay.
Right. One last thing. I know that you have an endorsement by the Scea, South Carolina Educators Association.
Absolutely. I definitely want to talk about that. I think it's very significant. The South Carolina Education Association is the statewide association for, of course, our educational system here in South Carolina. And there are 3 seats available in Richland School District 2. I do want to note that only 2 candidates were endorsed for Richland School District 2, and I was one of them. And I think that speaks volumes, that we have 3 seats available and only 2 were endorsed. I was one of them, and I'm grateful to be endorsed as an organization that I've always supported in my 18-year career. So I feel honored and privileged that the organization, after our interview, were impressed enough with what I want to do and feel like I will be an awesome asset to the board. So thank you to those that are watching, that are connected to SCEA. I am grateful. And again, if you're watching, that is a major endorsement. Please take it in consideration as you consider voting for Dee Bell Williams.
All right, that's Dr. Dee Bell Williams. She's a candidate for Richland School District 2. As she said, November is election day. November 3rd is election day, but it is definitely Vote-tober because early voting is in full effect, and record number of people are voting early voting. So please don't forget her when you are voting for Richland School District 2. Dee, thank you so much. Good luck to you. God bless you. And thank you so much for all of the work that you're doing in our community. We appreciate you. Beautiful.
Thank you so very much. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Dr. Dee Bell Williams, again, her information is right there on the screen. I'm Tre Tailor. Listen, if you have a story that could help someone cope with COVID, please go to my TailorMade production page and inbox me, and I would love to talk to you. If you have a story or product or service that could help someone cope with COVID, please email me at copingwithtretailer@gmail.com, and we would love to talk to you about being a proud sponsor, just like SCDHEC and It Together, the City of Columbia Office of Business Opportunities, Palmetto Media Connections, and Agape Counseling and Training Center. Now, coming up, more election 2020 candidate Scea Harley joins us on Thursday right here on Coping with COVID in It Together, and the Diabetes Advisory Council presents Wellness Wednesday, and we're going to talk about diabetes and dentistry. And then tomorrow, Cam West from The Voice will join us, and he's going to talk about his upcoming event. Let's check this out. That's tomorrow on Coping with COVID with Tre Tailor. I am Tre Tailor, and as always, I leave you with my reading from my Jesus Calling. Today is October 19th, and Jesus says, "Come to me with your defenses down, ready to be blessed and filled with my presence. Relax and feel the relief of being totally open and authentic within me. You have nothing to hide and nothing to disclose, because I know everything about you already. You can have no other relationships like this one with me." Jesus says, "Take time to savor its richness, basking in my golden light." One of the worst consequences of the fall is the elaborate barriers people erect between themselves and others. Facades abound in the world, even in my body and the church. Sometimes church is the last place where people feel free to be themselves. Sometimes church, people cover up with Sunday clothes and Sunday smiles. They feel relief when they leave because of the strange of the false fellowship. The best antidote to this artificial atmosphere is practicing my presence at church and always. Let your primary focus be communing with me, worshiping me, glorifying me. Then you will be able to smile at others with my joy and love them with my joy. That's your Jesus Calling for today, October 19th. I'm Tre Tailor. Until the next time, I wish you peace and abundant blessings. I encourage you to please be careful, be safe, and don't forget to wear your mask over your nose and under your chin. Take care. We'll see you tomorrow.
Coping with COVID is brought to you by the South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control. Visit scdhec.gov for an updated list of testing sites and important information on how to protect yourself, your family, and friends from the coronavirus. SCDHEC, healthy people, healthy communities. Also, the City of Columbia Office of Business Opportunities, helping to meet the needs of small, minority, and women-owned businesses in the City of Columbia. Log on to columbiasc.net/OBO. Agape Counseling and Training Center. Call 803-779-2777 for licensed professionals of counselors and social workers helping families, engaged and married couples, and individuals of all ages gain an understanding of all aspects of their life. If you're having a challenge coping with COVID, contact Agape Counseling and Training Center at agapects.com. And Columbia Housing Authority. The agency is looking for stories from former residents of Allen Benedict Court to retain some of the property's rich history. In its 80-year life, Allen Benedict Court has been home to some of the country's elite, including a Grammy Award-winning performer, corporate executives, national television celebrities, a host of doctors, lawyers, and NBA greats. So share your pictures, mementos, and memories at chcares@chasc.org. Coping with COVID, brought to you by the South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control, the City of Columbia Office of Business Opportunities, Columbia Housing Authority, Agape Counseling and Training Center, and Palmetto Media Connection.
Coping with COVID with Tre Tailor.